On today's episode of You Asked, Sony A80L versus the 2024 Bravia 8 OLED, how to fix colors that look like neon on your TV, who actually cares about TV speakers, and why aren't more TV review videos on YouTube in HDR? Welcome back, everyone. I'm Caleb Dennison, and this is You Asked. It's the show with hot questions and even hotter wings. Wait, that ain't right. Sorry, I meant it's the show where I answer questions you asked in hopes that I can help you and others with similar tech questions. If you've got a question for me, please email it to youasked@digitaltrends.com, and we'll see if your question gets picked to be answered on the show. Mark Rossi writes, I just purchased a Samsung QLED TV, and I've noticed the baseball field grass is insanely green. Any idea how to fix this issue? I followed your advice on the motion, and what a difference. Hey Mark, glad the motion control guidance helped. Now, as for the insanely green grass, without knowing what picture mode preset you're using, it's hard to know exactly what is going on. So, forced to guess, I would imagine you're using a picture mode that has a cool color temperature, and all that extra blue in the white balance is making the grass look a bit neon, or maybe just a little bit artificially green or bright. Now, if you're using the standard picture mode, which by the way is the default for Samsung TVs, or especially if you're using the dynamic picture mode, then your grass will look unreal. Now, there are two ways to go about adjusting the color temperature. The first adjusts only the color temperature and leaves all the other settings alone. On a Samsung TV, I believe it is referred to as color tone, and there you should find cool, standard, warm 1, and warm 2. Now, if when you go in there, it's on cool, try standard first and see if that works for you. If not, then try warm 1, and that should do the trick. The other way to go about adjusting the color temperature for more natural and realistic reproduction is to select the movie or filmmaker mode picture presets. Thing is, doing that is going to adjust more than just the color temperature, and that might require you to make other adjustments to get the brightness and motion looking just the way you like. So start with adjusting the color temp or color tone and see if that does the trick. And either way, come back and let us know how it went. Eric Larson writes, is there very much difference between the Sony A80L and the Bravia 8? Eric, it doesn't appear there's going to be a dramatic difference in picture quality, at least based on what I'm able to tell now. I haven't reviewed it yet. It's possible that the 2024 Bravia 8, also known as the XR80, might be marginally, measurably brighter than the A80L, but I have serious doubts that any increase in brightness would be visible without a direct comparison to a previous model, and thus not a good reason to spend more on the Bravia 8. I believe there's a slight redesign to the feet included with the Bravia 8, which doesn't mean a lot in my book and means nothing if you're going to be wall mounting. The remote is supposed to be more eco-friendly on the newer Bravia 8, and there's also a new eco dashboard on the Bravia 8 as well. I do know that the 2024 models will offer a new Netflix adaptive calibrated mode and a similar adaptive calibrated mode for Amazon Prime Video. Those features will, by default, use the TV's light sensor to automatically adjust the HDR tone curve and color temperature to make the TV look good no matter what your room's lighting conditions are. But you can also just turn the light sensor off, and at that point, those modes are gonna look a lot like the filmmaker mode would. So you be the judge as to whether that's something that you really want. But I will say that for the vast majority of folks, it's gonna be the smart move to buy the Sony A80L at a discount than it would be to buy the Bravia 8 at full retail price right now. And speaking of buying the A80L at a discount, we've got a link to it at its best price right down below. Chris Hewitt writes, why do these high-end TVs spend that much on built-in speakers? Who uses those? Well, Chris, I realize the second part of your question may have been rhetorical, but I'm going to answer it anyway by saying that lots of people never add a soundbar or other audio system to their TV. More people use the TV's built-in speakers than have supplemental audio systems, if the data that these TV brands give me is accurate. And furthermore, I think folks who do have audio systems don't necessarily want to use them all the time. So built-in speakers on TVs are still important. But also, you've got reviewers out here, like me, who deem the built-in speakers to be important on an ultra-premium TV because we think nobody should spend so much money on a TV that looks spectacular but sounds like garbage. So perhaps for fear of getting raked over the coals by yours truly or anyone else who spends big bucks on their TVs, TV brands keep pushing for good audio systems on their most expensive products. Gertost, or maybe it's Gertost, writes, is it worth selling my 65-inch C2 and buying an LG G4 77 or 83-inch on Black Friday? Or keep the C2 some few years more when the technology is better? Or is the difference in picture quality from C2 to G4 that huge? Okay, so there are a few different questions there. I would say that if it wasn't going to be a financial burden, the upgrade from a C2 to a G4 OLED would be significant. The G4 is far brighter and has better processing. I do think you would notice a difference for sure, but remember, you're already enjoying OLED picture quality, so you already raised the bar. The G4 will look better, but you would not get the holy Toledo moment that you would have experienced if you were upgrading from a 5-year-old LED TV to an OLED. I don't know if that's your story or not. I'm just trying to paint a picture in which you may not be gobsmacked by the improvement from the C2 to the G4, but I do think it would bring you some delight. Also, let's point out that you're talking about making a move from a 65-inch to a much larger 77 or 83-inch, which tells me that you really want to upgrade anyway. So if you want to wait for Black Friday to do it and save a little bit of money, that's what I would do. Oh, and one more thing. I do not think that the WRGB OLED picture quality is going to get significantly better in the next year or two. The G4 will be a TV that you can hold on to for at least 5 years since it has that 5-year warranty, which is another reason I think it's a smart investment. This next question I love because I've been interested in speaking on this topic for years. Ibrahim writes in, wondering why there are so few YouTubers uploading content in HDR, especially display reviewers trying to show off picture quality of TVs and monitors. He notes that Vincent Teo at HD TV Test has done it, but doesn't seem to be doing it anymore, and that he likes watching The Villa Man in part because he does upload in HDR. Why is HDR on YouTube not more popular since so many TVs and other displays support it? Right, so Ibrahim, the short answer is that creating an HDR video involves far more work and some expensive gear than you might think, especially if you're gonna do HDR well. A lot of work already goes into making a standard SDR video beautiful. Editing involves a lot of cutting and transitions and sometimes graphics work, and that's already time-consuming. But to make a video really beautiful requires careful and skillfully executed color grading as well. You can use stock color settings and it'll look fine, but if you want a really gorgeous video, color grading is a must. But then things get more complicated, involved, time-consuming, and thus expensive, if for no other reason because time is money, when you involve HDR grading and mastering, especially when the video content involves a TV. See, one of the challenges we constantly face when we shoot videos here is getting a good exposure on the TV. That TV is like a constantly moving target for the person shooting the video. In this case, that would be Zeke or Chris. When the TV gets bright, the image will get blown out if you don't step down the exposure. When the image is dark, you want to step up the exposure so the TV doesn't look dim in the video. Now, when we film, we use studio lights to brighten up the background, maybe a little bit of the foreground, so we don't have to constantly adjust the exposure. Well, not as much anyway. Oh, and if we used auto exposure on the camera, it would drive you nuts. Trust me, you don't want to have to watch that. Now, when you grade and master content in HDR, at least if you do it well enough to actually make a difference, you're gonna need to do a lot of different work. You have to make a grade that works well for both HDR and SDR because not everyone is gonna be able to watch the HDR version, so the SDR version must look awesome. You're targeting a different gamma curve and the color space is expanded too. Also, it's a skill to do this right. And at the end of the day, We have to decide whether we're going to put out one HDR video or 3 SDR videos per week. And honestly, we're going to have to choose the latter. But you've inspired me, Ibrahim, to put together a video about how one makes HDR videos. So I'm going to plan for that later this year. If you look at YouTube, there aren't a ton of creators doing high quality HDR videos. Some of my favorites are Jacob and Katie Schwartz, Phil Holland, Eugene Belsky, and Athena Gala. So maybe I can connect with them and we can show off what's actually involved. But we're always looking to take things to the next level. So perhaps HDR videos, at least a few a year, are going to be in our future here at DT. We'll see. Thanks as always for watching, everyone. Do you want to see some HDR content creation explainers and features? Let me know down in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. And until then, here's 2 other videos I think you might like.